Welcome to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcast on the annual EU budgetary procedure.
Each year, the EU approves the annual budget for the coming year so it can continue financing its policies and programmes in the fields of agriculture, research and innovation, border protection and many others.
But how is this budget prepared and adopted? Stay with us and we'll tell you all you need to know about this process.
To finance all its activities and policies, the EU needs money. For 2019, for example, we're talking about €165.8 billion, which is around 1% of the EU 28's gross national income.
This is not to be confused with the EU's long-term budget, known as the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, or MFF, which is a 7-year long-term spending plan allowing the EU to plan and invest in long-term projects.
That's right. Within the boundaries of the MFF, the annual EU budget lays down all EU expenditure and revenue for a single financial year, which starts on the 1st of January and ends on the 31st of December.
It is proposed by the Commission and agreed by the Council and the Parliament on equal footing. But what are the key steps and timing of this procedure?
Well, it all starts with European institutions preparing estimates of their expenditure for the next year so that the Commission could come up with a draft budget by the 1st of September, although in practical terms, this tends to happen somewhere in May or June, leaving more time for negotiations.
Following this more pragmatic calendar, which differs from the treaty deadlines, the Council adopts its position on the draft budget in July, although it waits until the end of August or beginning of September to adopt it formally, allowing the European Parliament to meet the deadline of 42 days after the Council to adopt its position.
The Parliament's position is determined through the work of its Committee on Budgets and other specialised committees and needs to be voted by the plenary.
If the Council's and Parliament's positions diverge, a conciliation committee is convened to iron out the differences and work out a joint text within 3 weeks.
If an agreement is reached in conciliation, the two institutions then have 14 days to formally approve it. But if negotiations fail, we go back to square one and the Commission needs to come up with a new draft budget.
We'll look into that situation later. For now, let's see in greater detail how the Parliament can amend the Council's position on the annual budget draft. Stay with us.
MEPs can modify the annual budget through amendments to the Council's position, but there are different points of entry for such amendments. Members of the Budget Committee can table their amendments directly in their committee, others can do it in the specialised committee, and in some cases, they can be tabled directly for the plenary.
Budgetary amendments are processed by the Budget Committee, which decides on a coherent set respecting the limits of the EU's long-term budget and in some cases calling for flexibility instruments.
An important forum for building compromises on the Parliament's position is the Budget Coordinators meeting, which consists of the Chair and Deputy Chairs of the Budget Committee, political groups' budget coordinators and budget rapporteurs.
To pave the way for smooth negotiations and identify potential discrepancies, Parliament, Council and Commission meet at several key moments during the year in what are known as trilogues, and the Parliament regularly prepares documents explaining its position.
The Parliament and Council need to agree on the new budget before the end of the year. However, if positions are unbridgeable and conciliation fails, then the Commission is obliged to present a new draft budget.
Negotiations will continue, but if there is still no agreement by the 31st of December, the system of provisional 12ths comes into force automatically. Now, what does that mean?
It means that each chapter of the budget will be funded monthly, up to a maximum of 1/12 of the appropriations of the previous year or of the draft budget, whichever is the lower.
Now, this is a temporary default system, and when an agreement is finally reached, the adopted budget can apply retroactively to the full year.
You're listening to European Parliamentary Research Service podcasts.